Thank you, ma'am, for the wonderful introduction. And good afternoon to one and all present. My name is Shilpi Kalwani. I'm a future doctor, not the one that deals. I'm a future doctor. Jesus. I'm a PhD research scholar by qualification, and an author, a columnist, and a poet by choice. And I also give unasked advice on platforms like this on weekends. So yeah, I do that. So I'm going to begin by narrating a very beautiful story to you guys. Has anyone here ever been to Japan? Okay, we have one person here. Okay, so our story is based in the international location of Japan. It's a dated story. It starts in 1600. So in 1600, there was a small town in Japan called Yoshiwara, which is now the modern Tokyo. And it was the most prosperous era in Japanese history. People were earning a great amount of money, living comfortable urban lifestyles, and everything was going great. But when you dig out literature, you'll find that it was also the most depressing era in Japanese history. And why so? The number of suicides were really high during that time. There was a sense of meaninglessness or gloom surrounding that era. I wonder why. If you Google about the story, you will find it by the phrase, the floating world of ukiyo. Now, ukiyo refers to floating or transient. So I heard about this story a week back, and I started looking for answers. So let's try to decode what went wrong in this floating world. So we'll try to understand this from the perspective of cognitive neuroscience. Okay. So there is always a tug of war between two major areas of our brain, that is amygdala and prefrontal cortex. Amygdala is responsible for emotions, whereas prefrontal cortex is responsible for cognition. In simple terms, one controls emotion, the other logic. Amygdala is also responsible for anxiety, fear, complex emotions, and your body's response to stress. So when we are talking about the floating world of ukiyo, everybody's earning great amount of money, they're living a comfortable urban lifestyle, but there's something missing. And that something is mindful living or mindfulness. You might have heard of this term ample number of times. Mindfulness, in very simple terms, is being aware of the present moment, is paying attention to your thoughts in this present moment and making a conscious choice. Now, in this floating world of ukiyo, people were making more of pleasure-driven choices. When you become mindful of your life, your choices observe a shift. There is a shift from pleasure-driven choices towards purpose-driven choices. And when that shift happens, there is a change observed in your brain as well. Research suggests that the MRI scan of a mindful brain has a shrink amygdala. In simple terms, that means that the prefrontal cortex will expand. And when prefrontal cortex will expand, you will have better capabilities. You will have higher order logical thinking, decision making, rational choices. All this will get better with you. So there's also this very interesting technique called MBSR technique. I don't know if any one of you has heard of it. It's mindfulness-based stress reduction technique. It was given by an American psychologist called John Kabat-Zinn. And the amazing thing about this technique is it's a mental technique. It's a mindfulness technique. But it helps cure physical pain. It helps cure chronic illness diseases along with other psychological injuries. So mindfulness will not only take care of your social well-being, your emotional well-being, your spiritual well-being to some extent, but also of your physical well-being. Now, the irony here is that we have talked about the cognitive aspect of it, the scientific aspect of it, but we have bandages for cuts, we have soups for cold, we have ice packs for bruises, but we have no idea of how to deal with our day-to-day psychological injuries. If somebody is going through a tough time, somebody's having an anxiety problem, a personality disorder, they don't know how to deal with it. Until my early 20s, I had never heard of the term psychological injuries or emotional hygiene or any such thing. And the fact is that India is the world's most depressed country, with every sixth person suffering from one or the other kind of mental ailment. And yet we are at denial of it. We do not want to talk about it. If you go to a person and say that I want to talk about, having an anxiety problem or a depression problem, they will simply say, brush it off. It's all in your head. If you break your leg and you go to a doctor, the doctor never says, walk it off. It's all in your head. Never does that happen. But it will happen in case of having a mental ailment. Now, more than talking about mindfulness and how we can practice mindfulness in day-to-day life, is becoming more aware of these mental ailments and talking about it on public platforms like this. So I'm going to start with a very simple technique, which I have named as the SBMR technique, and it will not take more than 15 minutes in your day, and this is what you can practice for a more mindful life. It's a very simple technique. S stands for stretch. So you need to clench your fist and stretch yourself for 10 seconds in a day. And then the second step is to breathe. Simply breathe, take 3 long breaths. B stands for breathe, M stands for meditate. Meditation is an age-old technique. It's around 5,005 years old meditation technique. You sit in a particular position, you close your eyes, and you meditate. And the last one is reflect. Reflect, think it through. Think about the next decision, the next logical decisions you're going to make in the next 1 minute of your life. So SBMR looks like a very simple technique, but it has got a great relevance. It has also got its mention in chapters 2, 12, 13, and 18 of Bhagavad Gita. Chapters 2, 12 talk about SBMR from the perspective of science. The age-old technique of meditation is to sit in a particular posture and close your eyes. Now, why do we close our eyes? There's a scientific significance to it. If I asked you to clasp your hands and put it behind your head, the amount of area that will be covered by your hand is the approximate amount of brain that is involved in visual processing. That is the input that your eyes take in, the procession of it, the visual procession is occupied by that much amount of area of brain. So when you close your eyes and sit in a particular posture, it is about concentrating all your energy and your thoughts in this present moment, on your breathing patterns, on your existence. So there's logic behind every scientific technique or every ancient traditional technique that we have. Isn't that amazing? So now, having talked about this SBMR technique, I'll just run you through. You have a regular day at school and college, and you have ample amount of choices that you make. So I've just picked up 3 basic choices that we can talk about, and that may lead you towards a more mindful life. The first choice would be your friend circle, your peer group. I think that is one of the most significant choice that you make, because your friendships are the most important personal and emotional investment that you make. So be very wise about it. Choose people that inspire you instead of people that drain you. The second choice that we make, social media. We are feeding our brains with a lot of data, information, news, and God knows what. And a research at Harvard University states that we have around 50,000 thoughts in a day. And out of these 50,000 thoughts, 80% of these thoughts are repetitive. And out of this 80% repetitive thoughts, 98% are negative. So when you're scrolling through those social media channels, looking at someone's new car, or new home, holiday pictures, you're actually adding to your neurotic dysfunction, to be precise. Consume social media, but do not let it consume you. The last one being routine. Sounds very simple, the day-to-day habits. Human behavior is observed in patterns, and the activities you practice for a longer duration of time become your habits. I'll give you a simple equation. Habits lead to neural activity that leads to a behavior that leads to a personality. I'll give you a simple example. For example, if you have a habit, like there are a lot of students sitting here, so you study till late night and you do not get enough sleep. That becomes your habit. Now, this habit is going to have a neural impact or a neural activity in your brain. You might have an expanded amygdala that is responsible for emotion. Now, you will have a behavior. That means in a situation where you are supposed to react logically, you will react emotionally. You might get aggressive, you might get angry because your emotions are taking over your logic. And because of this behavior, your personality is getting framed. People are presuming that you are an maybe aggressive personality or a type A personality, which might not be your actual personality. So a simple habit is leading to a neural activity, which is leading to a behavior, which is ultimately shaping your personality. So that is why it is very important, even when you are making the slightest of choices in your day, be very aware of what you're doing. Now, having talked about mindfulness and the scientific approach of it and everything, I think it is very important for us to know when we are going through a tough time or an emotional loss, or we do not know how to do an emotional first aid for our own self. So I decoded like 4 simple points that I'll like to put forth when you're going through a tough time and what you should be doing. The first one is dialogue. I think it is very, very, very important for us to talk about emotional pain on platforms like this, in schools, in colleges, and understand that emotional pain is as severe as physical pain. And there's nothing wrong about talking about it. You can talk to your friends, your mentor, your guide, your favorite teacher, anybody who supports you. The second is have a distraction. When I say distraction, I mean it in the most positive sense. Have a hobby or a passion or any interest that takes your thoughts away from that emotional loss and keeps you invested in that distraction. Practice that distraction. The third is routine. Whenever you're going through an emotional loss or a tough time, the first thing you do is you try to skip your routine. You try to bunk those classes. You try to bunk work and sit in isolation. You think something is wrong with you. You start overeating, oversleeping. All these are, primary symptoms of you facing a psychological injury. So don't do that. I know it's very hard, but try sticking to a routine. Don't bunk those classes. Don't bunk work. No matter how hard you feel, just go for it. And the last one is seek external help. There is nothing, absolutely nothing wrong with asking for help. We have been conditioned in a way in a society where we feel that asking for help is wrong. Like going to a counselor or a therapist is like a taboo, but there's nothing wrong with it. Even your teacher, your mentor, your guide, anyone you feel can help you at this moment, you should seek that help. If you're not able to cope it on your own, go for it. Go for an external help. So let's look at it from the point of view of a living example. So I'm a little biased, so I've picked up my favorite comedian, Jim Carrey, and I was reading about it like 2-3 days back, and James Eugene Carrey is his complete name, and he's a Canadian-American actor, writer, artist, and this man has a very interesting story. When he was 12 years old, his father lost his job, and the entire family was forced to live in a small van. And he took up really odd jobs like working as a janitor or working as a security guard. Presently, his net worth is around, I think, more than $150 million. So this man took up real odd jobs, and he's very vocal about mindfulness and meditation techniques that he practices in everyday life. In one of his interviews, he said that it is very strange for people to believe that you can close your eyes for a few seconds and get away from all the noise that is happening inside your head. But it is actually a very useful technique, because at the time when he lost his father, during that emotional injury time or the psychological injury time, he used to practice a lot of mindfulness and meditation to get out of that period. So that is what I took away from his interview. Now, I would just like to leave you all with the thought that practice more of why of something than how and what of it. And just like you take care of your physical health every day, you have certain routines in place, you brush your teeth, you bathe every day, but you never question it, why am I doing it every day? Just like that, you need to also take care of your emotional hygiene. 10 minutes a day or 15 minutes a day, set up a routine for that. The nature and basis of every experience is within you. and the only way out is through will. Thank you for being a wonderful audience. Thank you so much.